All right, so we're talking DWGs primarily as the focus today, but like I said earlier, after the DWG presentation, because I think that's going to go fairly quickly, there have been a number of sort of quick tips that have come up in Q&A sessions over the last few weeks. I kind of put together a list of things I'd like to go over that might, there are things that should have been covered in training or were covered in training, but might be forgotten or just sort of underutilized throughout daily workflow. But starting off, I want to talk about DWGs, saving out DWGs in particular. We will also look at ways that we can import DWGs, but that's sort of less of an issue since those are primarily just reference things for us. Very rarely are we importing DWGs for primary documentation purposes. There's a few things about DWGs before we even get into it that we need to kind of realize. And the first one is that we need to be efficient with our time when we save out DWGs. There have been a lot of times in the past where we, I would say, go overboard on trying to get the most efficient, or sorry, not the most efficient, but the most clean, nice looking, most usable DWGs for our consultants. And that's great. We should definitely do the best we can, but we shouldn't spend 4 days putting together a DWG package that the consultant's just going to redraft, draft over, explode, or modify on their end anyway. So usually what I do is suggest saving out the most efficient method possible, and always solicit a response. Ask, do these work for you? Is there something we can do on our end that might take 15, 10 minutes, whatever, an hour to clean up that'll save you a few hours? You know, like I said, we don't want to spend 4 days to save our consultants 10 minutes of cleanup on their end. So trying to strike that balance, find that balance, and hold that conversation with them just to know like where the time is being spent and who's most efficient at that time management to get the coordination done. So those are sort of the two things that we're trying to get out, or the objectives of DWG coordination is we want the drawings to be coordinated effectively, and we want to be efficient with our time and our consultants' time. Don't send them DWGs that they're going to have to spend 4 days cleaning up at the same time. We shouldn't expect to spend 4 days cleaning up something that they should be able to do on their end in 10 minutes. DWGs are strictly a 2D format for our coordination purposes. So Archicad doesn't necessarily handle those very well because the Archicad documents are extrapolations of a 3D file. So in that light, usually what I recommend doing when coordinating anything is to always send a set of PDFs with the documents. It doesn't matter if it's IFC or DWG coordination, always send a complete package, which includes DWGs and PDFs together, so that they can see the documents, the line work and everything, but then also see the final document set and see what the intended appearance of that document set is. Okay, so getting into the weeds now, how we actually work to get DWG saved out. The first thing that I want to note is in the view map, there is a, let me collapse this down. There is a drawing export folder in the template. And this is to be used explicitly for export and import of DWGs. This is organization of views, whether those are elevation, floor plan views, worksheets, whatever we need to use to coordinate those DWGs, that should be saved here. The reason for that is because that gets linked to the publisher sets. So there is, or should be, the drawing export folder in the publisher set for views to DWG, for example. So the drawing export folder right here, you can see that we've got that set up with the general export, all of these sort of subfolders. So setting those up by consultant is a great way to make sure that we have the right layer combination, the right view settings, whether we're using the worksheet method or just saving straight from the live floor plans, elevations, and sections. It doesn't matter. Setting that up ahead of time in the view map is really critical to kind of maximizing the efficiency of the export. The next thing to look at is the translator settings, and there's a few quirks about the translators and how they work. You know, from a floor plan view here, for example, if all I do, of course, it's going to freeze up on me. If all I do is go to File, Save As, it asks me what that translator is. So doing a File, Save As, you can see right here that I have the For Further Editing translator. The unique thing about DWG translators in particular is that they are specific to the computer, not the file. So if I make a change to this translator, if I say, for example, my save extras, I want to store the original blocks, that change has only been made to my translator. So if I've made that change and somebody else is saving out DWGs later, that needs to be relayed to the project team. You can export and import translators as needed to share them back and forth, but there's so few settings in the translators that it's sort of just important to set those up or verify that they're set up on your computer. Once you set that up, the for further editing translator works great. Once you get that set up, it should be good for all files because it's specific to your entire computer, not for that file. As far as exporting content, you can kind of ignore all of the attributes stuff. The only thing that might be critical is the fill methods. Because Archicad fills have a foreground and a background fill, you may want to use the fill conversion table, but that's getting into the weeds of their translator settings. The best thing to do is make sure that we're exporting fills as is. And that's going to basically mean that the fills go out as sort of a duplicate or redundant fill with the pattern fill in the front and a whiteout fill in the back. That makes it pretty easy on the AutoCAD users end just to delete all whiteout fills. So that export fills as is the important part of that section of the translator. And then save options. This is an important one. Archicad can read up to AutoCAD 2018. And because of that, we can export up to 2018. Generally speaking, it's safe to export to 2004. I don't know of any consultant that would be using an Archicad version older than that. And all the way up into current Archicad versions, they can read AutoCAD 2004 files. So that would be one important file format option. The next is that we want to make sure that we're saving to model space. Saving to paper space, for those not familiar with AutoCAD, paper space is like the layout book in Archicad. So paper space does the consultant virtually no good. It's saving out what amounts to a DWG with linked files. You want to save model space, and you want to make sure that everything is placed to a single DWG. For some reason, this gets grayed out, so you have to actually switch to paper space to make sure that this is a single DWG, and then switch back to model space. I think the idea is that if it's model space, it should always be a single DWG. But if you did set it to a linked file and then back to model space, those are going to come in as XREFs. So that's really kind of the critical piece right there, is making sure that we're model space and single DWG. There's options if you did have XREF files to paper space, you can change there. But like I said, generally speaking, everything should go to model space. I've never heard of a consultant asking for the paper space file. The last thing, and this is really not as critical because the default is to have these unchecked. Make sure that store original blocks is unchecked. That's going to basically revert all object elements in Archicad to their original appearance. So if you have like the multi-sync object, for example, and you've changed it to a single basin sync, it's going to default back to the default setting, which is the double basin sync. So make sure that you're not storing original blocks. Other than that, setting up the translators is that simple. The last thing about the translators is that if you are using a publisher set, you'll see that here under if I go to publish these drawings right here, the for further editing is selected, but if I went to publish, you notice that it's grayed out right there and italicized. That means that it's trying to pick up the translator setting from somebody else's project. So down here, it's at the bottom. It's not applicable to my file. So I need to make sure that I'm using for further editing in my file. So I apply that translator to my file from the drop-down list. Make sure that it's not italicized. It actually shows as a black font. Otherwise, when you go to publish, it's going to say that you cannot publish the file. Okay, so methods for saving out DWGs, right? So we've set up our view map. Let's go to like MEP backgrounds. We'll just pull up this drawing right here, for example. It's set up to go straight from here. I could use the publisher, but if this is all that I need to save out, all I need to do is do a marquee around this. And the reason to do a marquee is because there's very likely other things floating out around it. In fact, you can see that, like, I'm zoomed way out, there's stuff way up here off to the side. Like way off to the side, that's something we need to clean up. I don't know if Youngert's in this session, but that's something we should look at for this file. Let's go back into here. There we go. Okay, so we'll do the marquee around it. The marquee is important because when I go to File, Save, make sure that the translator is set to the correct one. You can review the settings here as well, just like before, and then say Save. And this is where you're prompted, do I want to save the entire drawing or just that marquee area? If I hit marquee area, it's going to export that from there. I'm not going to present the time it takes to wait for a DWG to save, so I'm just going to hit cancel here. I do have the floor plan view right here saved, and essentially this is what you get, is a collection of lines and fills. Oh, that's from the worksheet, that's the wrong file. Go to this one. Collection of lines and fills, and you can see here that I didn't save this from the marquee, so I end up with all this garbage off to the side. Certainly that could be cleaned up afterwards, but if you use the marquee, it'll isolate out just the pertinent building, floor plan, elevation, whatever content that you're trying to save. The important thing to note about saving from a floor plan or any live view is that it explodes all of this into lines and fills. And if I look at the content here, the edit selection set, it's not just for editing, it's also a great way to review what content is in a selection. So you can see that I have roughly 30,000 elements in this floor plan view, just in this selection. The reason for that is it takes the walls, for example, and as it kind of feathers those walls together, brings them together, you can see how it's interlacing all of those wall elements into these various fills. You know, if I just do a sweeping selection over that, that one cluster has 8 fills over it, where really this, all of this stuff can be one fill, or should be one fill even. So there's a way to deal with that in Archicad. You don't have to save out the DWG and then go through and grab all this stuff and modify it. The method for that is to actually create a worksheet. So if I were to place a worksheet, let's just go to my documenting tools and here, create a new independent worksheet. You want to make sure that oops, wrong. All right, so if I place that around here, this should be a source marker. So if I open that up right now, and again, I should have had this done ahead of time because now it's got to translate all that. It's going to automatically convert this stuff to lines and fills just like it would in the DWG. So if I grab all of this stuff now, it should have a very similar element count, that 26, 30,000-ish elements. So you can select all of that stuff and preemptively go to edit and fill consolidation and edit and Linework consolidation and convert all of that stuff down to fewer elements. You can use a few tricks like the find and select tool to grab groups of elements that you might want to consolidate versus others, just so you're not consolidating like all of the doors into all of the walls that may have intentionally overlapping or redundant elements. But if I grab all of this stuff now and look at what's in this selection, it's a different layer combo, but there's still 20-some thousand elements here that could be consolidated down. So we have used this before to essentially, it's a great way to preemptively clean these documents up. I think that this starts to get onto a slippery slope of how much effort are we putting into it. If we have to run this method for every single interior elevation, floor plan, section, elevation, it's taken sometimes multiple days to get a full package of DWGs out. So it's not the first method that I gravitate to. Obviously, the preference would be just to set up a view and either publish or save as from those views. And then, like I said, solicit that response. Make sure that we're giving them something that's usable as is. The next method of saving out DWGs is actually from the publisher, and these, or sorry, from the layout itself. So if I had, for example, let's go to the interior elevations. If I just wanted to save this view out, I could just go to File, Save As from here. The important thing to note as a save as from a layout is that the translator will not explode this content. It forces the XREF regardless of the translator settings. And of course, it's got to update all of this stuff. So the better way to handle that is actually from the publisher. If I just go File, Save As, and I've already done that. I think it's this one right here. Yeah. So you can see that it saved all of this stuff out, but it saves these as drawings. And these would be basically either blocks or XRF files when we send the consultant the DWG file. It also saves things that are not included on the layout. So here I've got all of our stamps, which we probably don't want to be sending them. So even if this is an acceptable format for consultants, you should still do a marquee around those elements. The workaround for that to get all of these things exploded is to actually set up a publisher set. And I think it would be layouts to DWG model space, but I think I actually use the paper space option here. So here, for example, I've brought in shortcuts for from the layout book for those sets. So these basically are shortcutted into that publisher set. And then what you can do is actually create a new folder. And I'm just kind of giving it a dumb name there. And these shortcuts, I don't recommend saving from those shortcuts because you might have multiple folders that you want to combine. So you can grab those things, drag them to here, set the format of those to DWG. That's going to now give you that translator option as before. And then you can grab that folder, and here there's a merge to one DWG file option. So you can click that, and you notice that the icon for that folder changes. If I publish as is, each one of these sheets is going to go out as its own DWG, which may also be preferred. That may be a method to get out layouts of details, for example, that you don't want to just have as a big soup of drawings on a single working space for the consultant. For interior elevations, this has worked, especially on smaller files like this that maybe only have a dozen or so sheets of interior elevations. And then you just click there and give it a publishing destination, go to publishing properties and save that out. Always publish to your desktop, especially when working out of the office, and then relocate that DWG to the server after you're done. I've seen some large DWG files take 20 minutes plus to publish directly to the server. So publish that to your desktop. Again, I don't want to wait 10 minutes for that to save out potentially. So I've preemptively saved this out as a file. And you can see the output of that publisher set. So this is all of those interior elevations saved out here. It more or less lines them up in a single line, but unfortunately it does not give those titles below the view. It just gives those sort of cropped views or the viewpoint content for these elements. So this may not be ideal on a large file, but if you've got multiple stories, for example, you could save out multiple stories as grouped DWGs. So you could say this DWG includes all interior elevations for the basement, this one for the first floor, this one for whatever the annex building. So you can break them out that way. Just bear in mind that this may include extra content. So it's always good to kind of proof these DWGs before they go out. And then also send the PDF set of these. Like I said before, I can't express that enough, is that this sort of ends up being a soupy mess, and it's anybody's guess which room this is because there's no title. But if they have a PDF set, ideally they could actually associate that with a drawing title on the PDF. So that is the publisher method. trying to think if there's anything else. That's all of the notes I had for saving out DWGs. Now, for bringing DWGs in, there's a couple of things that we need to be aware of. The first thing is that the best way to bring a DWG in still is the drag and drop method. There have been a couple of times, and we do need to be careful about this. I'm just going to go to, I'll just pull up this worksheet right here. Oh, actually, hold on. The reflected ceiling plans is another sort of exception to our workflow. Let me cover that before we talk about bringing DWGs in. Sorry about the scatteredness of this. So when we look at the reflected ceiling plans here, for example, we have this layout. It has the 3D document potentially, or floor plan view, and the grids overlaid over the top of with multiple drawings. Saving that out does not overlay those documents. If I save out or publish from this layout, just like we saw with the interior elevations here, where they're, or here I should say, where they're all arrayed along a distance, it's going to save out floor plan view and grids and furniture next to each other, not laid over the top of each other when it combines those. So the workaround for that is to essentially use the worksheet method. But here I have a first floor reflected ceiling plan worksheet, an independent worksheet, and I copy and paste those into a single document. So here I'll go to the 3D document. And the other thing about this is it gives them the entire plan without the break marks, so they get the content all in one. So now when I copy this, just select it all, Command C, go into my worksheet and Command V, and it should prompt me, do I want to save in the current view or center in the current view or in the original location? If I continue, if I save in the original location, it's going to line up over any other DWGs that I've sent them. So original location, that's a critical piece right there, so that I know it lines up in the X, Y, or the X and Y coordinates, and then I place that. I can then come back into the layout and copy and paste the grids and furniture section and overlay that. Wait for it to finish processing here.
Patrick, is this preferred to just like saving out from our layouts that already have it layered of the two views, or?
Yes, because it's not going to save this out with them overlapping each other. If I were to take all of the RCPs here and use the publishing method that I did for the interior elevations, they're not going to be stacked up properly. They're going to be basically arrayed, and then you're leaving it to the consultant to line up the grids with the floor plan. So it's certainly preferred. I think that if you did do a save or save from the layout, I would just do a file save as. And what that's going to give you is sort of this interior elevation appearance where everything's placed overlapping, but as an XREFed block, essentially. And less useful for the consultants for sure. But using this method, it's sort of the best of both worlds, and it's not that time consuming. I mean, we can even do it here on the fly. I probably won't run the Linework and fill consolidation because sometimes that takes 3 to 5 minutes. But if you had furniture and grids or whatever other elements are on the grid layer, I can copy those and come into here and paste, as long as trying to paste from multiple stories. Doesn't like that for some reason. I've never seen it do that before. That's a new warning to me. Ideally, and I've done this before, we just copy and paste from there. It might require that you temporarily set these to home story only, or only visible on one story. But overlaying those grids and or furniture pieces, you can then basically grab all of this stuff and see, looking here, we're back up to that, whatever, 18, 20, 15,000 elements, whatever is visible there. You can go to the edit, reshape, fill consolidation, and Linework consolidation wizards. I don't want to run these because this, in the event that it does take 10 or 15 minutes, I don't want my computer frozen up for that amount of time. But really, it's as simple as that, just grabbing everything, not even trying to find specific fills or anything, and running those consolidations. Just be aware that if you have the wrong settings, it may try to, for example, consolidate this fill with this fill, and those are two different fills. We want to keep those as two different fills. But worst case is you just have to delete it, start over, or undo it, and kind of be more selective. You can always use the find and select for example, and I could say I want to grab all fills that are using that fill type, grab all of those, consolidate those down. Here I can see that there's 5 fills within that area, consolidate those, and sort of do it more systematically that way. You know, grabbing like those ones, for example, and consolidating those down, grabbing the fills that are in these walls, for example, consolidating those down. So you can be more systematic about it and ensure that you're not merging fills into a single different fill type.
Sorry, Pat, really quick, can you just remind us, what is the fill consolidation command that you're doing?
The fill consolidation command is basically to take, what do we have here? We've got 6,636 fills. That should go actually pretty quick. If I go to fill consolidation, it should reduce the number of fills that we have in there. So merge identical fills, identical adjoining fills. That should be the one that we need checked to make sure that dissimilar or non-identical fills are not merged. And then we say okay, and this takes anywhere from 10 seconds up to 10 minutes sometimes, depending on how many fills we have, but 6,000 shouldn't take that long. But we should see the number of fills in this greatly reduce after. I'll let it go for a minute or two just to illustrate it. If it takes longer than that, we'll cancel out of it. On some larger files like the KR files, Arthur Washington, and I think even WP, I've seen the fill consolidation sometimes take 10 or 15 minutes. So we're certainly not going to expect people to hang out for that long. But that's that tool. The Linework consolidation, oddly enough, even though there's usually more line work, goes significantly faster. So if I go to Linework consolidation, just use the default settings. I mean, we could sit here and look at every single setting. The one that you might not want is the explode polylines into lines and arcs. You can uncheck that if you want to keep any polylines in the file. But otherwise, just you know, we don't need to ignore any elements. We're going to merge overlapping and connecting elements of these various types. Now you can see that merge lines 900 and some, et cetera, et cetera. So we've reduced the number by roughly 1,000. The fill consolidation probably would have reduced significantly more element types. But that's because anytime you explode an Archicad file, just like we looked at before, it gives you all of these various element types. And I think it did start to consolidate some of this down before I canceled it, because typically you'd see like all kinds of triangulation at these wall junctions. So those are the methods for saving out DWGs. And again, just to reiterate in a nutshell, the quickest, easiest, most efficient way to manage our time on this coordination is to save a view to the view map from floor plans and elevations and sections and whatever else needs to go out. Save that view into the drawing export folders and just do a file save as, or link those folders to a publisher set for views to DWG and publish or save out from there. Send that out with PDFs and solicit a response. Are these going to work for you? We've had consultants in the past that just kind of grumble about it, and we don't know about it until we're well into the project about how unhappy with our DWGs they are. We've had consultants receive the same DWGs and work just fine with them. So solicit a response, because every consultant and even some of the people within specific consultant firms are going to react differently to the DWG translation. As far as bringing DWGs in, there's a couple of methods that we can use. You may,
hey, Patrick.
Yeah.
Quick question. Sorry if I missed it. Did you talk about opening up the DWGs that we produced into e-drawings or some other third-party thing to check them and that?
Yeah, we did look at opening them up in a separate instance of Archicad, but you can also open them in e-drawings. I tried to do that actually this morning, and my e-drawings the installation is corrupted, but everybody should have an e-drawings application on your computer. It's just a DWG viewer. You can zoom in and make sure that the line work looks right and you don't have any weird fills and stuff. It'll give you a good preview of what it looks like in Autocad. Certainly probably more realistic than looking at it in Archicad, because Archicad again is reading these fills. You know, if we look at this, for example, it's reading this fill with a foreground and a background pen, which is not realistic to AutoCAD. So e-drawings is going to give you a little bit more realistic appearance of what our consultants are looking at when they're using AutoCAD. It does not, however, give you the ability to see how many fills you have in a cluster, for example, because you can't really select, edit, or manage those elements. It's just a viewer.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody on this call do that as a matter of course before they send out to open it up into a different application?
Yeah,
Occasionally,
it's helpful just to kind of see what they're looking at and kind of get a sense of how much work you need to put into it to clean up, or if it's good to go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I usually always do that just to make sure it's clean enough.
Yeah, and honestly, the worksheet method does a pretty good job of giving you that preview as well. It lets you see kind of where the fills are at, and lets you kind of assess how poorly things may have exploded into lines and fills before you even save it out. It's still definitely worth your time to take 10 seconds to open it up in e-drawing, zoom in on a few corners, and make sure that things just didn't go haywire.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I thought that was last time we had talked about that was part of our good workflow to kind of have like an objective view, so to speak, of it. So if anybody else is having an issue with that not loading properly or isn't installed on your computer, to let Barta know and he can get that hooked up for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't do a ton of Dwg coordination directly, so I just haven't even used e-drawings in months, and it's probably there's an updated version or something that I need to look into. But it is a useful tool for this workflow for sure. Okay, I want to touch on bringing drawings in. Those should be brought into a worksheet, and there's a couple of methods for it. You may have stumbled across this attach XREF option. I do not recommend that by any means. It attaches a lot of attributes and other junk that we just don't want to deal with. But the methodology should be to make sure that you have a correct worksheet. And I'm just giving these some absurd names so I can make sure that they get deleted or they don't get sent into this file. So create a worksheet that makes sense. Save that worksheet to your drawing import folder or a coordination folder that makes sense in here so that you can access it. And there's the drag and drop method, which is basically just to say, you know, if this came from my consultant, I can drag and drop that into here, place it as long as the scale of this drawing matches the scale that it was saved at, it should come in fine. You'll notice that everything is using a mauve pen because the DWG likes to use that, and that's or likes to use the 1 through 20 pens. And this is why we have the DWG import black, so that we can set that DWG to view as black. We can set it to view as gray or red as well. And that's just all pens, red, gray, or black. It can make it a little bit more usable. You do notice that there's a lot of cover fills in here. And this is the exact same thing that our consultants have to deal with when we send them DWGs. Archicad doesn't necessarily save out DWGs very well, and it doesn't necessarily bring DWGs in very well. If you're using the drag and drop method, the thing to be aware of is that we've seen this before come in with bizarre scaling issues where this distance may be correctly scaled, but this distance may not, and vice versa. So just make sure that whatever you're bringing in this way, you've checked the scaling of it. The other way to handle that is to open that DWG in a separate instance of Archicad. Grab that stuff, and because we don't want all of their layers and everything in there, you can type Command Option T, that's that edit selection set again. I can move all of this stuff to, and you'll notice like this is how Archicad saves out layers, right? Every single layer with a different pen gets a different layer. But I can save all of this stuff to the Archicad layer. Don't worry too much about the pens, but again, it's using pen 7. If I wanted to make sure I was using one of our drafting pens, I would say 32 or 33 is a good pen, and adjust all of that stuff to a pen that we're using in our template. So from here, I can just copy and come back into here and paste that stuff into here. Oops. Oh, you know what? I just realized this is in Archicad 24 and I can't paste back to Archicad 23. Lack of foresight there. But that's essentially the other method for getting DWGs into your file. And I've never seen an issue with scaling or distortion of the DWG when you're using a copy and paste method like this. So that's the other method for importing DWGs. You do want to open that up in what I'd call like a sandbox file. That's when you just go into your new file or open in a separate instance of Archicad. You can go new and import that way, or just file open, and convert that stuff to the Archicad layer and bring it in. Again, that's going to consolidate all of those layers down, but that's a better option than importing all of our consultants' layers for the most part. Okay, well, that session was not the 20-minute presentation I was expecting it to be. Is there any questions on DWG import and export? Since we've hit the 45-minute mark almost, I'm probably going to hold the quick tips presentation off for the next lunch and learn. Otherwise, I think we're going to be running over the hour. Yeah, if there's any follow-up, if anybody has questions about translator settings, if anybody has solicited a response from a consultant and got any negative feedback, please reach out to me. We can either sort of strategize with that consultant, or you and I can get together and figure out the best way to get things sent out more efficiently and as cleanly as possible without wasting our time.
And Pat, all this stuff's on the BIM manual as well, too, if we need to reference it, right?
That's correct. Yeah, there are a couple of pages, and I will share the links to DWG import and export from the BIM manual to the Slack channel if anybody needs those references.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, Patrick. Have a good
Thanks, Patrick.
one.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.